And so what we're going to do, though, is take about 15 minutes to go through a quick wrap-up of what we've talked about. And then what I want to do is, what Eduardo and I want to do is open it up to the crowd for last questions, last comments, as we talk about steps going forward. Before we do that, though, if really we could thank the folks from the AHA staff, including Carlo and Patrick, as well as the Brain Garage Group. So we've had a great night and a full day, and I think that some of the key themes and topics are on here. We talked about technology with Vinod last night as is it part of the problem, part of the solution? We talked about disparities, access, and to me, one of the best panels we had last night and today was the one on patient engagement today. I found that particularly from our patient advocate who was up on the stage. I found that completely inspiring and something not to forget. The validation of health impact of tools via science, and in some of the companies, I think was very different than what we heard even 2 years ago, where there was much more of an emphasis on science and how are we going to prove. I'm looking at Joe here. Why are we going to do clinical trials? Because we need the evidence to get people to use it. What's going to be the provider's role? Are we going to be a bunch of bots and AI, or is there going to be a role for the human being in medicine? And I feel pretty comfortable that we'll be around at least for a little bit, but we're going to be operating and acting much different. How do we infuse evidence-based science into technology? And what are some of the things going on in the AHA that really have been highlighted at this meeting, and the opportunity for many of us in the room to be engaged with the AHA? It was also good to see that at a technology-oriented meeting that many of you were active on Twitter. What I like about being active on Twitter is nobody knows if I'm reading the Red Sox homepage or if I'm tweeting and doing something useful. And a lot of you were tweeting and doing something useful and capturing a lot of the activity of the last 2 days. And so kudos to all the twerps out there, and keep it up. There's also good old-fashioned human interaction, and you might have noticed that the organizers planned more breaks and longer breaks than might typically be had at a conference where you're trying to squeeze in a lot of stuff. And that's because, as we talked about the planning of this meeting, that the networking, the human element of this is really important. And so I hope that a lot of connections were made, business cards exchanged, Twitter handles exchanged, where people could start to connect with one another and maybe do some work together. And that's sort of the whole point of this. Eduardo?
So this morning, you all heard that AHA has formally launched the Center for Health Technology and Innovation. One thought I've had is, what are we going to call it? I have a different center that I'm associated with, the Center for Health Metrics and Evaluation. So we can't just call it the center, so we'll call it CHTI, or the Center for Health Technology and Innovation. As I reflected on what I heard yesterday, and I think that the fact that I heard it yesterday is a reflection of what the center is about, I was most impressed, most affected by the notion that if people might be forbidden from driving, will doctors be forbidden from diagnosing? That I didn't sleep last night thinking about that one. But the truth is that we are going to reach a point where the ability to go through data, analyze it, and make quick decisions about what to do is already done way faster by machines than we are able to. CHTI wants to be a catalyst. And a catalyst, for those of you who don't remember your chemistry days, is an accelerant. Speeds up a chemical reaction. And I would venture to say that one of the things that we want to do through the center as an accelerant is maybe reduce the time it takes to translate research and adopt what we know from 17 years to something much, much less. So in that catalyst role, the center wants to harness technologies, health technologies, and relationships with medicine, health, and science to do three things. One, improve outcomes. In other words, improve health. Two, increase engagement, which will require increasing participation. And then lastly, but very important, lower cost, or we might frame that slightly differently, present a compelling value proposition. Because as we heard from Joe, sometimes it's direct cost, sometimes it's just things are done a whole lot easier and it reduces the burden on others. Value proposition, lower cost. 3 things again: improve outcomes, increase engagement, lower cost. And where we want to close and start a very short dialogue for this afternoon is thinking about how the center might engage with y'all and others. We have some thoughts about some things. One is to create an innovators network. That would be an AHA Inside program. Things like this and maybe more, networking, studies. You heard about from Dr. Chatterjee some things that we might be doing, and other kinds of initiatives that might come out of and be catalyzed, if you will, by the center. An innovator circle that's focused on broadening the impact of tech and health. It's really been very exciting to be here last night and today, and to hear this very serious discussion and serious discussions that have been had about things that we don't ordinarily talk about, because we don't ordinarily have all these different perspectives in the same space talking about how we might work together. And then lastly, innovation and research partners, relationships that can focus on multi-year outcome studies. People at AHA and the science world are really used to those, and programs that are focused on key health topics or the health continuum. I think one of the great things I heard today was about the health continuum, and this conversation is all aspects of health and health care, supporting individuals, supporting systems, supporting clinicians, supporting caregivers, a little bit of everything, and harnessing technology to make that happen. And so I think at this point, Bob, we wanted questions or comments, and we've decided our job is to let you ask questions, and then we are going to point to people out there to answer those questions. This really is going to be a discussion. Bob and I are just here to deflect. So any thoughts or comments for us to think about, and for Patrick and his team to think about as they reflect on what's transpired and what they ought to be getting ready to do over the next week, month, 3 months, 1 year.
Are there any sort of core issues that the AHA is going to focus around?
So you're looking at us, and I said we're going to deflect that way. Stand up, and then your voice will project. That'd be great. Stand up and ask.
That'll give us a chance to decide who we're going to pick on. So Nancy, I hope you're paying attention. Eric, do you have a microphone? Maybe
Yeah, so one of my, I guess I'm turned this way now.
Yeah.
One of my big questions is, with the Innovators Circle, or outside the Innovators Circle, but the Innovators Network of where the AHA is able to bring in, certain entities or companies to identify a solution. Are there any core value props for those companies that the AHA is evaluating, or any solutions that they want to go after?
So Eric, you're going to be one of the lead science volunteers on this initiative. What are you going to think about in terms of the value proposition for people who want to partner with us on this topic? And maybe we can also we'll pull in our chairman of the board, Al, next to help out from an AHA perspective. So Eric, you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I would say that in part, a company that shared similar values as the Heart Association that you've heard about. I mean, it's really going to be about, at the end of the day, trying to help patients and innovate how we're delivering care. Beyond those kind of general concepts, that's got to be a starting point. The actual business model that's being set up, I think we're exploring a number of different opportunities. Even at these meetings, we've had an opportunity to meet with various companies, and it goes everything from, simply working with us to, as we said, to take in the science inside parts of this thing, to development of brand new technologies. And anywhere along the sort of the spectrum, we're open to consideration. I think that's the good part of it. The AHA is pretty open to different ideas and different concepts. So we would welcome you coming to us and say, here's what we're thinking about, and then sit down together and figure out what works.
Al, you're chairman of the board of directors, so you have the responsibility of, in some ways, looking after the brand of the AHA. as well as having fiduciary responsibility for the AHA. How would you answer the question about what do you want to see in a relationship?
Well, I think it was laid out earlier by Eduardo. But I think the key is we're trying to make an impact. We're trying to accelerate science, and we're trying to be that honest broker, bringing the parties together. How do we collaborate to make a difference in this world? And if we could do that, I'm pretty positive of the changes that we'll see happen. So I think from my perspective, I'd like to see collaboration. And I've been seeing it all yesterday and today. And I think that's what will make the difference. So from my perspective, how do we collaborate to make that impact?
Great, thanks, Al. Don't worry, Nancy, your team covered for you. Yeah, Mark.
So, sticking in the thread from last night, and I was struck by what Vinod said about the iPhone has only been around for 10 years, but look how far we've come. And as we look at this idea, this notion of collaboration between healthcare and health tech, how do we accelerate the adoption, and I should say accelerate the adoption of new technologies and solutions? And I want to pick on someone out there because I know that she's been at a number of our events, and Randy, there you are. Wanted to ask you, how do we accelerate this collaboration so we can speed up the cycle and see new technologies and solutions in the marketplace?
Excellent question. I've been wondering the same thing. But I think that this is a great opportunity for the center to help inventors like me really fill this space and fill it quicker than we could on our own. Because I've found myself over the past 3 years trying to find a business lead for what I've developed, trying to find funding for what I've developed, and just having a group of like-minded people at the table to bounce ideas off of and to be able to learn from in their trajectories and their experience, I think can really help speed along the innovations that each of us have, right? We've done the research for the most part on all of our different technologies, and so what about the development now? What's next? How do we get these technologies implemented and scaled?
Build on that. So as an entrepreneur and somebody who's very involved in digital health and talking about value of digital health, and a lot of folks talked about studies and randomized trials and the pitfalls of trying to do those things. I mean, I can tell you, I don't even have more than 2 weeks, right? So if I come up with a great idea and signal that to the market, I've got about 2 weeks before somebody else is going to say I can do that, regardless if they can or not. So I don't have to prove anything. The bar is very, very low. You can just create noise and throw dust in the eyes of everybody and say, me too, I can do that. So there's really not enough time. So to build on what you're saying and to kind of answer your question, I would take the ideas of innovation and research and put them together and say, could the AHA sponsor an innovative research forum where we really challenge the idea of a randomized controlled trial as being the gold standard? And can we really demonstrate some very, very innovative ways to prove value very quickly and have a trusted guideline or trusted entity put some kind of stamp of approval or saying, this is a worthwhile thing to put forth or to deploy. So I think health systems are just very, very reluctant to spend any money on anything which doesn't have some sense of value. But I think that innovators are really reluctant to go out and spend years or even weeks or months of effort and money to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what they're doing is worthwhile. There's got to be something in between that we can do and have a very innovative research competition or innovative research forum and redefine how we can do research on value in digital health.
Eric?
Yeah, it's partly the forum and how the methodologies used, and are there creative new study designs? And some of you who sort of kicked around ideas at this meeting, we've sort of thought about how can you do this very pragmatic, how can you do it in different ways than the traditional one-to-one randomization sort of systems. Mintu talked a bit about this as well. But the other part of this is actually just getting centers, as you just talked about, who are willing to do it. We had one discussion here of one place that were doing a small study at one institution that was going to take more than a year or more to get an inadequate, probably sized number of patients into the study. That's probably not going to cut it. You don't have a year and a half or 2 years worth of time to get a too small study done. And you really need to set up a system of several institutions around the country treating different types of patients who are willing to take on sort of this new technology as in part to get exposure and experience to that. again, I think that's the things that this group and the center is going to be looking at, the idea, can we develop within healthcare those partners who are willing to be sort of cutting edge and willing to try this out, not necessarily to make a lot of revenue, but to develop best-in-class and disruptive sort of ways of delivering care.
They're signaling us that we're coming to the end of our time. So, Eduardo, do you want to close us? Thank people on behalf of the Heart Association?
That's a perfect way to close.
There you go.
So on behalf of the Center for Health Technology and Innovation, on behalf of the American Heart Association, on behalf of the faculty, on behalf of the staff, on behalf of everyone who is here and contributed brain power, thank you very much. Have a great, awesome weekend. And,
Wicked awesome.
Wicked awesome. And we will be tapping you again because this has been great. Thank you. Enjoy.